chant at the beginning, the sutra books. Julie will pass them out. He's on page 2. Gathan opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in hundreds of thousands of millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning. Good morning. It's so good to see everybody here. This nice, intimate group. And everybody has been sitting hard and working hard, and I hope resting, also really trying to balance our busy lives and trying to get a little grounded from all of that busyness. I'm going to start with something from the hidden lamp, which I've talked about before. I've used this story. This is the hidden lamp, stories from 25 centuries of awakened women. And it's Ziyong's Earth, China, 17th century. She was an abbess, a nun, a monk, and a great Zen master. A monk asked Master Ziyong Chengru, 30 blows, are they the actions of a man or an enlightened being? Ziyong replied, just as long as the fellow isn't beaten to death. The monk said, when you speak, the congregation assembles like clouds. In the end, who is the great hero among women? Ziyong said, each and every person has the sky over their head. Each and every one has the earth under their feet. The monk gave a shout. Ziyong said, what is the point of recklessly shouting like that? The monk then bowed respectfully, and Ziyong said, the Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world. If I take up the challenge of speaking, I must surely borrow the light and the dark. the form and the emptiness of the mountains and hills and the great earth, the call of the magpies and the cries of the crows. The water flows and the flowers blossom, brilliantly preaching without ceasing. In this way, there is no restraint. Isn't that beautiful? Yes. That's just so amazing. The Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world. If I take up the challenge of speaking, I must surely borrow the light and the dark, the form and the emptiness of the mountains and hills and the great earth, the call of the magpies and the cries of the crows. The water flows and the flowers blossom, brilliantly preaching without ceasing. In this way, there is no restraint. There's a lot in there. First, let me tell you, Ziyong, she was one of Gulu Fan's official Dharma successors in the 17th century. And she was also named abbess of the Eternal Glory Chan Cloister in Beijing. Eternal Glory Chan Cloister. What a name, Eternal Glory. That sounds pretty amazing. You know, it's different than, usually it's the name of a mountain that a monastery is. This is the Eternal Glory Chan Cloister. So I remembered this story, Ziyong's Earth, because Eve Marco makes the commentary in this book. And I was just visiting Eve, so this just came up for me. And this is what Eve says. The monk asked about a great hero among women. Is this the real question? She says. We have the wonderful women's lineage chart that we have begun chanting, and I hope to chant it tomorrow, actually, during our service. But do we pine for a great hero? Do we women pine for a great hero? Where do we seek inspiration? Ziyong tells the monk, each and every person has the sky over their head. Each and every one has the earth under their feet. In the end, it's up to us. That's what I always remind those who are taking the precepts, the Zen precepts. When people study here, they study the precepts, which are guidelines for living an ethical life. Living the precepts calls for each person's response to what spontaneously arises in their life, not the emulation of a role model, no matter how worthy. Right? We're all responsible on meeting whatever arises in our life in the best way we can in the moment. And most of the times, we just get it wrong. But that's the life of a bodhisattva, you know? It's like impossible living ethically all the time or living compassionately all the time. You know, it's impossible, but we keep trying. You know, we fall off the path and we get back on. That's our life. That's the life of bodhisattvas. And then Eve continues, but Ziyong says more than that. She says, the Dharma does not rise up alone. It can't emerge without reliance on the world, to take up the challenge of speaking, to say the unsayable and express the inexpressible. One can't stay mute. This is an important point here, right? To take up the challenge of speaking. So many of us say, oh, I'm just not going to say anything because it might make things worse. Maybe I'm totally on the wrong end of the stick here and I'm not seeing clearly, right? For many reasons we don't speak. But Ziyong is saying one must take up the challenge of speaking. And so not just women, men as well, right? We must take up this challenge. And then she says, we must use everything. The language of dualism, the language of oneness, the smell of water and the sound of flowers, the aliveness of life itself. Everything can be used as skillful means to deal with the varied situations that come up in our lives. As long as, and this is an important proviso she adds, as long as one is not attached to one side or the other. Oh God. One is not attached to one side or the other. Like, I'm very attached to being right. Anybody else have that attachment? Right? So she's saying we can use everything to be skillful, to speak, as long as we're not attached to one side or the other. That is an amazing practice there, right? Because the three poisons in Buddhism is greed, anger, and ignorance. They will always cause difficulties in our life. And they're there for a reason. We have to learn something. That's why they keep coming up in our lives until we really learn it. We're going to be very uncomfortable. But our practice is also about opening to that uncomfortableness, right? That's one of the things that happen when we practice Zazen. There's some kind of opening that happens with this practice. Our hearts kind of crack open a little bit. We kind of notice, oh, I have a heart and it hurts. So as long as one is not attached. So these three poisons, right? Greed is all about attachment, being right, wanting this, wanting that, going shopping and wanting a lot of things. Greed, right? Just never satisfied. We had that wonderful service this morning, the Gate of Sweet Nectar, all about hungry ghosts and inviting them into this space, this sacred space that we are creating by our sacred presence. We're inviting them here and we're trying to feed them. What are we trying to feed them? I do make an offering of some rice, trying to smush it up so it's easy to go down, because hungry ghosts are those big heads, long neck, big mouths. They just want to eat everything, but they can't swallow, so they're never satisfied. What an image for us, hungry ghosts, right? In life. Attached to being right. That's a big one right there. What's going on there? This attachment to being right. Well, there's something lacking, isn't there? That we have to be right. There's something missing. We're missing here. We're missing something. Worthiness. We don't think we're enough, so we have to be right. It's kind of helping to build up that ego, the small ego. So this practice of mindfulness is really important because we're getting intimate with ourselves. We're noticing, ooh, I have this thought. In fact, this thought is going on a lot in my head. And I can see that it's causing some feelings here. And then she talks about the forsythia outside. She's talking about spring, but I mean, we can talk about these beautiful green leaves outside of the trees, the plants, right? Each, she says, each preaches the Dharma. And according to its karmic life and condition, at the same time manifesting something timeless and essential. You know, does the tree do it better than the marigold in terms of preaching the Dharma? And she says, we're not identical. Each one of us in our difference is uniquely suited to meet life's infinitely different needs. Our individual traits, including our gender, cause us to harmonize with certain situations, or to say the precise word, take the precise action, and laugh the great laugh that expresses the inexpressible. That great laugh can be a hearty guffaw or a high tinkling giggle, a low-pitched chant, or a bird-like song. As Ziyong said, we must borrow everything, use everything. Only in this way is there no restraint. And Jitsujo gave such a great talk on Sunday at our Sunday morning Zen program. She's a Zen priest from the Zen Center of Los Angeles. She said, she told us about this refrigerator magnet she has on her refrigerator, a little sign. It says, "Blessed are they who can laugh at themselves, for they shall never cease to be amused." Blessed are they who can laugh at themselves, for they shall never cease to be amused. That is a good one. How many of you, find it difficult to laugh at yourself? No, not at all. All right, Jeremy is honest. He raised his hand. Right. Why not? Why are we taking things so seriously here? Why? Eve's husband, Bernie Glassman, right? He started ODD, the Order of Disorder. And that was for clowns, because he thought that was so important to have clowns in our Zen lineage. We need some humor here. And Julie, there is a bag right behind the recycle box over there. And I want those of you who do not have a clown nose to please get yourself one. She and her mom made beautiful bags that has a clown nose on the inside. And if you're getting too serious, just put that clown nose right on yourself. All right? Just walk around like that. So it was really nice. I actually got to see Eve about, I don't know, 3 weeks or so ago, I flew into Massachusetts because there was a Roots and Refuge retreat for Asian American Buddhist writers. There were 32 of us. And Chenzing Han, who did another wonderful talk on Sunday Morning Zen. She's an author who wrote the book One Long Listening about her experiences as a chaplain, training as a chaplain. So I flew into Hartford, and Eve picked me up at the airport. There she was. And Hartford Airport is really small compared to O'Hare. So it was really quite pleasant to fly into that airport. And she picked me up and took me to her home in Montague, about a 40-minute, 50-minute drive. And this is the home that she and Bernie lived in. They live in the country. It's really beautiful, green, lots of green. It had been raining a lot, so there's a lot of mosquitoes there too. For those of you who, don't like mosquitoes. Anyway, I was talking to Eve about, her Sangha and what is her Sangha doing there. She's got a little Sangha. And she said, well, they were really interested in talking about identity. And she said, what was important to her is having real conversations. And even if you didn't agree with someone, you were able to stay and speak what was in your heart, mind. And I said, yes, I want that too, to be able to be real. But that's not so easy to do, is it? I don't know, has anybody had real conversations lately with, whoever they're interacting with? And especially people who you don't agree with. Have you had a chance to have a real conversation with them? Not easy, right? Good, Jackie. Yeah. So I said, yes, I would like that too. Well, I had the chance to practice, and I failed. I had the chance to practice at the retreat, actually, and I failed. And I mean, it wasn't a huge failure, but it was still a failure. And I'm still processing it. What happened was we were writing, right? And I had volunteered to teach hula, as movement during intense writing and thinking, trying to be the whole body. And so my little half hour was happening right before dinner on Saturday. We started Friday evening, and then on Saturday it happened. Right before dinner, a half hour. And we had been, all thinking and sharing our writing, and all of that. And then this was at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, which is, I had always wanted to go visit there. So I was really thrilled to be there. And we stayed in what used to be the farmhouse that was built in 1770. I mean, talk about old buildings on the East Coast, right? And evidently at one point, the whole area had been raised of trees and whatever as the pilgrims came over and settled the land. And in this one, they had these stone walls with enclosures, not too high, but there were a lot of rocks around there too. Beautiful stone walls, old, perfectly fit, about the same height, and just those stonemasons are amazing, you know, who can build those walls. Just amazing, beautiful lichens growing all over them. You know, it's really gorgeous. So in that, there was a round stupa, also made of stone. Somebody did that. And in this stupa, like in one corner of it, there were two relics of Shariputra. And I was like, Shariputra? Oh my God, there are two relics that Joseph Goldstein brought back from Burma or something like that. And Shariputra, you know, we chant his name in the Heart Sutra, right? He was one of the Buddha's, one of his best and brightest students. Shariputra was like, oh my God, there's Shariputra in there. And so I thought, well, where are we going to dance? I thought, oh, I wonder if it's okay to dance near the stupa in that thing. And so I asked the staff person there, I think it's okay if we do the hula in there? She said, yeah, I think so. So we did. And it was a beautiful day. And I did the movement. I was a little discombobulated, I must say. Usually I start off with a little introduction, but I said, let's just move. You know, we had a little music and I was leading them in movement. And then after I did that, I did the energy medicine exercises that I do here. And then I did a chant. Usually I would do that the opposite way. So the next day, I think it was, I was approached by the staff person who said that someone was feeling a little uneasy about what happened in that enclosure in the garden, and something about maybe cultural appropriation. And for me, I'm very sensitive to cultural appropriation because growing up in Hawaii, you know, there can be people who come from the continent, study for a little while, maybe take a workshop, and then start to use what they learn, making money, whatever, So very sensitive about cultural appropriation, very sensitive about people who call themselves kumu, which is the source. Kumu hula for students would be the source of hula for your students, right? Or kumu anything. There are kumus in different cultural activities, like there's people who make canoes, people who do healing. There's all of these different. So anyway, I was like, so I said, and she said, would you be willing to speak, like to have a meeting during lunch? And I said, yes, absolutely. So there was about 4 of us, right? So the woman started to speak, and she also acknowledged that, there were some things also upsetting for her, like the big fire in Maui that happened. And she actually had an evacuation that she needed to do right before coming here. She lived on Hawaii Island, which was also having some smaller fires. So she had images of being, she was at a hotel, evacuated, and so some trauma arose, and she imagined her grandmother, who was sent to the concentration camps for Japanese Americans during the war, and just having flashbacks. And so anyway, so she, felt some kind of dissonance as we were doing the activity, the dance. And so I noticed in me just these feelings of defensiveness, some anxiety, some fear, right? To be it was a soft kind of accusation, but for me, it felt like a big thing. And I thought, oh, you know, I need to be more spacious with this, right? But I wasn't. But I was trying to be calm. And one thing that I did say was, I'm really happy that this is coming up because we're having a real conversation, which is exactly what I had so enthusiastically said to Eve. Yes, I want to have real conversations too. So it was really interesting to work on this edge of being like not too defensive because of my training. So I was thinking, okay, this is a great opportunity to explain my training, right? Because nobody knows. And I want to write a book about Hula and Zen. Perfect. I have to explain what this is. And so I said a few things, you know, about my training. It took 12 years, et cetera. And then, you know, she was somewhat okay, but not totally okay still. And I could see this. And then they said, well, we should probably bring this up in the larger group. And I said, fine with me, because, you know, this is an issue that came up. Cultural appropriation is really a serious issue, I think. And so it was brought up in the bigger group, and she explained her point of view. And then the first thing I said, again, you know, I think what's so important about this is that we are having a real conversation right now. And so again, I said my little piece, but it's interesting because I noticed that, you know, how real was I being? Was I sharing my feeling of being upset about this? No, I did not, because I didn't feel like it would help the situation. But I think maybe I might have been wrong, you know? But it's so interesting, right? How do you be real? That's the question. And Ziyong is saying you use whatever is here, as long as you're not attached to one way or another. That's what Eve said. But I was still attached to being right, you know? That's so interesting. And I haven't totally integrated it, except I know that this is perfect opportunity for learning something about spaciousness, about being right, the self-talk that goes on, right? Because I could just really obsess about this. How dare she? I mean, you know, what good is that going to do? It's like nothing. It's that's for sure. I can see it's an ego thing for sure. No, I'm trying to lean into this uncomfortable situation here because I know I have to learn something here from this. So I've also been reading Larry Yang's book, Awakening Together, which is really the spiritual practice of inclusivity and community. Right, so I mean, being in a community, you know, is not all roses. All right, things happen, people get upset, right? And if you cannot stay and try to work it out, then, you know, then people leave. That's what happens. And I think that's really sad, actually. I think it's really sad. So Larry Yang, I like how he says, we need to remember that it is possible to notice deeply what is happening right now and understand it with enough wisdom. Treat it with the compassion inherent in our humanity and move into responses and actions that are of benefit as best as we are able. Right? It's kind of stepping out of a victim role, right? We all have the earth under our feet and the heavens above us. We're all humans, which is an incredibly precious thing. We are all humans, incredibly precious. And in fact, there's this one, the old story, right, that's out of the Samyutta Nikaya, one of the Buddha's teachings, where he describes this intrinsic value of being born a human because it is extremely rare. I know it's hard to think of it when we have so many humans on this planet, but it is actually extremely rare. The Buddha says that in the great ocean of life, there is a single ring-like wooden yoke that floats on this ocean, buffeted by the waves to the winds, you know. And in the depths of this great ocean, there is this blind sea tortoise that needs to break through the surface every 100 years to take a breath. The chances of that sea turtle when he or she breaks and to be in the middle of the yoke, that is how likely it is to be born a human being. Right? I mean, when you think about it, right, there's all of these bacteria. We could have been born a bacteria. Who knows, we might be a bacteria on this island, right? So this preciousness of our life really, I think I say it demands for us to wake up to what we are doing in our precious lives, what we are doing to ourselves, what we are doing to others. It demands that we wake up and see clearly and empathize. Here's the 14th century Dalai Lama, Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelugpa school of Tibetan Buddhism, which the Dalai Lama, current Dalai Lama, is a part of that lineage. Tsongkhapa wrote this: the human body at peace with itself is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours for this one time only. The human form is one with difficulty. It is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as the splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal. Make use of every day and night to achieve it. waking up. Waking up. What does that mean, waking up to you? What does that mean?
Remember that I won't live forever.
Remember that I won't live forever. That's a good one. Yes.
Be here and now.
Be here and now instead of there. That's what. Be here and now instead of there. Here, I'll do that one. Do you want to get anybody here? By the way, the Order of Disorder, one of their mottos is, don't be here now. And try, try, I think what Julie is saying when, remembering I'm going to die, it's like not taking your life for granted, right? Like, Larry Yang was saying again, how we actually take most of our life for granted. And we take for granted that we should be able to push away, deny, repress, or get rid of things that we do not want. That's one thing we take for granted, that we can do that, although it's not possible. That we deserve more of the things that we want. That's greed, that we deserve more of the things that we want. And when something is not a high or a peak or a valley or a great or awful, then it's not even worth noticing or attending to. And so we miss a lot of our lives. And about greed, going back to greed, today, in our life today, it's kind of the new normal is doing many things at once. Like if you're on a Zoom, you could be doing something else. You could be texting somebody, you could be working on a talk, you could be doing books, you could be doing all kinds. That's the new normal. More is better. But that's a kind of greed, right? It's a capitalist kind of mentality, which sometimes is okay. We got to get certain things done, but other times you're missing your life. It's just going by. I guess maybe sometimes you want to miss your life. I suppose that could happen too. Any thoughts or questions that came up for you in this talk about? Yes.
When you were telling the story about having a real conversation and you're still kind of processing, can you speak more to how you would decide if you would change the way you did it when you go to do it again because of this person's opinion or feelings? How would you decide if the way that you presented is authentic and real for you? Not everybody is going to understand or appreciate everything we do when we're being real, but as a bodhisattva, would you change anything if you did it again?
Ooh, how would you change it? How would you react? I mean, yeah, that's a good question, Jackie.
When do you decide if you're being real and if you are? Is it okay as a bodhisattva to stay there? Or is it necessary to continue to make sure that everyone's comfortable, that you're kind?
So, what a great question, Jackie. Does anybody want to try that answer? Oh, Roshi wants to try it. All right.
So I
Good.
don't want to answer Jackie's question. I just want to say this is a lovely talk you gave, but I am interested in that the very thing Jackie's asking you about, because we weren't there, so we don't know where this woman was coming from, and she was clearly traumatized by the fires. But for you to be accused of cultural appropriation is absurd. That's just absurd. And so there's being right and there's being okay with your opinion or your point of view. That's not necessarily egotistical. It's just stating a fact. I am a Kumuhula. You are a Kumuhula. You live and breathe hula. The idea that you are a culture, that's just absurd. That is totally absurd. So there's being opinion, there's being wanting to be right, and there's standing your ground, which is not necessarily egotistical. Standing your ground is being in the truth of your experience, however it is, not necessarily wanting to be right, but just being genuinely who you are. You are a Kumuhula. There's nothing you need to apologize for that. Maybe the way you did the dance or something there was off, and that triggered something for her. But I'm curious about the difference between being right and discerning something about being yourself in the moment and standing your ground.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think practice really helps. I think cushion time is incredibly important because that helps to let go of stuff that you really is not real, basically, right? All of those thoughts, are those real? So, and Zen is that practice of being right here, right now, right? Just as skillful as you can be in the moment by being who you are, yourself. We're all Buddhas, right? Bodhisattvas. So being, I guess, confident in that is very helpful in a situation like that. So I'm not so defensive, but I can see pain in someone else. And one thing I want to add is what I noticed after that, in spite of my discomfort, which I was able to breathe and be with, right, and know it was there. I was not trying to push it away, but I was noticing, wow, this is here, this is now. What I noticed was other people there were very friendly to me, and they came, like they sat next to me or I sat next to them, and they were really willing to engage, much more so than the day before. So I take it that they were interested in being real as well. And so I was telling Eve that story also, right? When I saw her, I stayed with her that last night too, and she said, that is what a bodhisattva does, right? You're just putting it out there in your, that's all she said. That is what a bodhisattva does. I'm like, okay, all right. Right. Yeah.
So I have a thought. This morning at the Gate of Sweet Nectar ceremony, I was really moved by the part at the end where we give the samadhi vows to the hungry ghosts. We feel their distress, we feed them, we celebrate their liberation, give them the vows, all kinds of things. And I was so soothed by that. And I'm just thinking about this situation, and I'm so glad that you're finding a kind of curiosity, a curious investigative inspiration in this moment, because the ability to give Dharma teachings to people in distress is a miraculous opportunity. And you can do that both in the book you're writing, and I'm sure that this woman is also, and others there were illuminated by the Dharma that you embody and that you shared in the both in the class and as a participant in the workshop. I'm sure of it. And that just, so I'm just thinking about the preciousness of the Dharma, and that I'm really glad you're finding inspiration, even though it's painful in this encounter, and going and figuring it out.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It was interesting as I was listening to you share the story, you know, with the woman. I felt myself, like, just hearing the story, I felt that reaction like coming up in me, like how dare she accuse you, you know? And it was like it was almost like I wanted, like watching a movie, like, you know, you want, like, you're my good guy, I want you to what I wanted is at the end for everyone to be like, no, June's right, you know. And I was like, I was starting to attach to the opinion that you were right as well, you know. And it's just, I think there's something very much in the human nature to kind of want to always be on the right side. And so, yeah, I think it's like something we can feel in each other. We want to take sides, and of course, I can understand that too. You know, like you were talking about wanting more, like the spaciousness. Like, it was interesting last night. I was feeling a lot of spaciousness, and then when I went to go to bed, some thought came up that just like turned everything around, and it was very interesting to see how quickly like that can change, and how quickly it's just one little thought can really kind of contract into that sort of like, no, I'm right, and this and that, and so yeah, everything you're talking about is very very close to me, to the body. You know, I can
Good, good. And so Bernie and Eve and Jishu, right, with their bearing witness retreats to Auschwitz, right, they always include the victim and the perpetrator in their prayers, seeing yourself as other and other as yourself. What an amazing teaching, right, at Auschwitz, where there was so much trauma done to a people. To see both victims and perpetrators in this web we weave, right? That one is the other. And I mean, I can see the perpetrator in me as well as the victim, right? That's what Jitsujo said also on Sunday, to see myself as other and other as myself. That's a deep practice. This practice of oneness, separateness and oneness.
I really enjoyed your talk, Roshi. It reminded me of a quote I read from Roshi and Brown recently, and it's really stuck with me. Nirvana is meeting somebody and not forming an opinion one way or the other.
It's beautiful. I think it's really beautiful. I mean, you know, some people we just naturally like, right? And so we want more of that person. Other people, something happens and you just don't like them, and that's aversion, right? So we're trying to open to both, trying to let go those poisons of greed and anger, right? We're trying to let them go, see them arise, let them go. That's the practice. And ignorance, trying not to ignore reality. Oh, yeah, I was going to read you something else that I found really beautiful in this Awakening Together book. It's from the poet Tom Hennon, and he's got this book called Darkness Sticks to Everything. Darkness sticks to everything. Like people or dogs, each day is unique and has its own personality quirks, which can easily be seen if you look closely. But there are so few days as compared to people, not to mention dogs, that it would be surprising if a day were not 100 times more interesting than most people. But usually they just pass, mostly unnoticed, unless they are wildly nice, like autumn ones full of red maple leaves and hazy sunlight, or if they are grimly awful ones in a winter blizzard that kills the lost traveler and bunches of cattle. For some reason, we like to see days pass, even though most of us claim we don't want to reach our last one for a long time. We examine each day before us with barely a glance and say, no, this isn't the one I've been looking for, and wait in a bored sort of way for the next, when we are convinced our lives will start for real. Meanwhile, this day is going by perfectly well adjusted, as some days are, with the right amounts of sunlight and shade, and a light breeze scented with a perfume made from the mixture of fallen apples, corn stubble, dry oak leaves, and the faint odor of last night's meandering skunk. Just to think of days, and all the beautiful complexity and simplicity in a day, and how we just for the most part, don't even notice, except that they're going by fast, that we don't notice the beauty of each day, no matter what.
Prepare for lunch.